The air in the office was a carefully curated lie. It smelled of lemon polish and recycled oxygen, a sterile scent designed to project an image of clean, efficient wealth. From her side of the imposing mahogany desk, Alara Vance saw only the truth. It was an aroma of dismissal, the cold fragrance of a door about to be shut in her face. Across from her, Marcus Thorne, the branch manager of Sterling Trust Bank, steepled his fingers. It was a gesture he had likely practiced in a mirror, a pose meant to convey wisdom and authority. On him, it just looked pompous. His suit was too tight at the shoulders, his tie was a garish slash of silk, and his smile was a predator's grimace. "So, let me be clear, miss," he paused, glancing down at the simple, one-page application on his desk, as if the name were a particularly distasteful insect he had to identify. "Alara, you are applying for a $2,000 personal loan for a community garden project." He said the words community garden project, as if they were a communicable disease. His gaze flickered over her deliberately chosen attire. Worn but clean jeans, a simple gray sweatshirt, and scuffed sneakers. It was a uniform of invisibility, the kind of outfit that made people in places like this look right through you. Marcus was not looking through her. He was looking down on her. "That's correct," Alara said, her voice soft and even. She had practiced this tone as well. It was the voice of someone who did not expect to be heard, someone already accustomed to disappointment. He leaned back, the leather of his chair groaning in protest. "And you have no collateral to speak of. Your listed address is in a transitional neighborhood, and your current employment is listed as freelance researcher, which is a rather creative way of saying unemployed, is it not?" Every word was a small, sharp stone thrown to test her composure. Alara felt a familiar, cold knot tighten in her stomach. It was not anger for herself, but for the countless others who had sat in this very chair, feeling the weight of this man's casual cruelty. This was not about a loan. This was about a multi-billion-dollar merger hanging by a thread. Her company, Vance Holdings, had acquired Sterling Trust Bank 6 months ago. Now, they were on the verge of a historic merger with Titan International, a global financial powerhouse. The deal would create one of the largest financial institutions in the world. But Titan CEO, a shrewd and cautious man named Chen Wei, had one condition. He needed absolute assurance of the ethical integrity and operational stability of every consumer-facing subsidiary, which led to the file on Alara's real desk, the one in her penthouse office overlooking the city. A file thick with anonymous complaints about the Northwood branch of Sterling Trust. Complaints of predatory fees, discriminatory loan practices, and a manager who ruled his small kingdom with an iron fist. A manager named Marcus Thorne. The board meeting to finalize the merger was in 72 hours. Chen Wei's due diligence team was already in the city, ready to make a final recommendation. Alara had this one chance, this one narrow window, to see the rot for herself. She had to know if it was just one bad apple, or if the whole barrel was spoiled. "I do have work," Alara said, maintaining her quiet demeanor. "It's just not on a consistent payroll. The garden is important for the neighborhood. It provides fresh produce for families who can't afford it." Marcus chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Noble, and utterly irrelevant to a financial institution. We are a bank, Miss Alara, not a charity. We assess risk. And looking at you, at this application, you are the very definition of a bad risk." He picked up the form with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated, and dropped it into the wastebasket beside his desk. "Application denied," he said, his smile widening. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual clients to attend to. My assistant will show you out." He pressed a button on his intercom, his gaze already moving to the polished surface of his computer monitor, dismissing her existence entirely. Alara stood up. The dismissal stung, exactly as it was meant to, but beneath the manufactured shame was a cold, clear stream of certainty. She had seen what she needed to see. The complaints were not exaggerated. They were understated. This was worse than she thought. And she had less than 3 days to prove it before everything her father had built came crashing down around a foundation of corruption she had failed to see. Walking out of the office, she felt the weight of her father's legacy settle on her shoulders. He had been a giant, a man who built Vance Holdings from nothing. Arthur Vance was a legend who believed you could not understand a business from a boardroom. "You have to walk the floors, Alara," he would say, his voice rumbling with conviction. You have to talk to the people who sweep them and the people who answer the phones. The truth of a company lives in its roots, not in its highest branches. He had died 2 years ago, a sudden heart attack that had thrust Alara, then only 28, into a role she felt wholly unprepared for. She had a master's in finance from Wharton, spoke 3 languages, and had spent summers interning in every division of the company, but nothing could prepare you for the crushing responsibility of being the final word on an empire. To honor his memory, and because she genuinely believed in his philosophy, she had spent the last 2 years doing exactly what he said. She had worked undercover on assembly lines, in call centers, and in shipping warehouses, all under assumed identities. She learned more in those months than she had in years of business school. She saw the inefficiencies, the frustrations, the quiet acts of heroism, and the petty tyrannies that never made it into a quarterly report. Sterling Trust was her first major acquisition as CEO. She had bought it because it had a long history as a community-focused bank, a perfect fit for the Vance Holdings portfolio. Or so she had thought. The data looked good. The profits were stable. But whispers had started to emerge from the lower ranks, anonymous emails to the corporate ethics hotline that were consistently buried by mid-level management. Whispers that pointed to a systemic problem. Her symbolic link to her father, the one thing she carried with her on these undercover assignments, was his old journal. It was a simple, leather-bound book, its cover softened and worn with age. Its pages were filled with his observations, diagrams, and thoughts. She had started a new section in the back, her own notes written in the same meticulous script he had taught her. It was her most prized possession. She sat on a bench across the street from the bank, the journal resting on her lap. She opened it and began to write, her pen scratching against the page. Marcus Thorne, arrogant, dismissive, derives pleasure from belittling customers. Treats loan applications as a judgment of personal worth. Clear bias against lower-income applicants. System enables this behavior. No oversight. As she wrote, the bank's doors opened again. A young woman, clutching a handful of papers, walked out, her face streaked with tears. She looked overwhelmed, lost. Behind her, a teller with a strained expression held the door, offering a small, helpless shrug. Alara watched the scene unfold. She had seen this woman inside, waiting nervously in the queue. A moment later, Marcus Thorne himself emerged, standing on the top step of the bank. He was not looking at the crying woman. Instead, he was greeting a man stepping out of a gleaming black Mercedes. The man was older, dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than the loan Alara had just requested. Marcus's entire demeanor had changed. He was fawning, his smile now genuine, his posture almost subservient. He clapped the man on the back, laughing at something he said, and ushered him inside with the reverence usually reserved for visiting royalty. The contrast was sickening. It was a perfect, ugly diorama of the problem. 2 sets of rules. 2 kinds of justice. One for the rich, and another for everyone else. Alara knew, then, that simply observing would not be enough. She had to do more. She had to understand the mechanics of this broken system, the gears of cruelty that Marcus Thorne so expertly operated. She watched the young mother, whose name she would later learn was Maria, sit on a nearby bus stop bench, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Maria was a single mother of 2, a waitress who had fallen behind on her mortgage after her son had a medical emergency. All she had needed was a temporary loan modification, a small bit of breathing room to get back on her feet. Marcus had not only denied her request, but had lectured her on fiscal irresponsibility in the middle of the crowded bank lobby. He had made an example of her. Alara's heart ached with a righteous fury. This was not just bad business. It was a moral failing. It was a cancer at the heart of the company she now led. The system that enabled Marcus was just as culpable. The corporate structure was too distant, too reliant on numbers that told only part of the story. Thorne's branch had excellent metrics. He closed loans efficiently. He minimized defaults. Of course he did. He did it by rejecting anyone he perceived as a risk, regardless of their circumstances, and fast-tracking applications for the wealthy who did not even need the money. He was gaming the system, and the system was rewarding him for it. His employees were trapped. Alara had seen the fear in the teller's eyes. A complaint against a manager like Marcus would be career suicide. He was the king of his castle, and corporate was a distant, uncaring overlord. They would see a disgruntled employee, not a corrupt manager. This realization solidified Ilara's resolve. She could not just fire Marcus. That would be like cutting off a single weed and leaving the roots to fester. She had to expose the entire rotten foundation. She had to force the executives at corporate, the VPs in their comfortable offices, and the board members preparing for the merger to see what she was seeing. She needed undeniable proof. And she needed to protect people like Maria. Ilara put her journal away and pulled out a cheap burner phone she had bought for the assignment. She dialed a number she knew by heart. It was the private line for the director of the Vance Foundation, the charitable arm of her company. "It's me," she said, her voice low. "I have a situation. A woman named Maria Sanchez, mother of 2, facing foreclosure. I need you to discreetly reach out to her through the Emergency Housing Initiative. No connection to us. Clear her mortgage arrears and set up a 6-month forbearance." Immediately, there was no hesitation on the other end. "Consider it done, Miss Vance." "Thank you," Ilara said, and hung up. It was a temporary fix, a small act of justice in a sea of inequity. It solved Maria's problem, but not the larger one. For that, Ilara needed to set a trap. Later that afternoon, using a different anonymous email account, she sent a carefully worded message to the regional supervisor for Sterling Trust, a man named Peterson. The email was vague but pointed. It hinted at potential procedural irregularities at the Northwood branch and suggested a review of their recent loan denial rates, particularly for applicants from lower-income postcodes. She didn't mention Marcus by name. She just planted a seed of doubt. It was a long shot. A message from a concerned citizen could easily be ignored. But it was a start. She spent the rest of the day observing the bank from a nearby coffee shop, meticulously documenting the flow of customers in her journal. She noted how long people in work uniforms waited compared to people in business suits. She noted the teller's tense, forced smiles. She noted Marcus emerging from his office only to greet those who looked affluent. It was a perfectly functioning machine of prejudice. The next morning, Ilara returned to her bench across the street. She was nursing a lukewarm coffee when she saw a car with a Sterling Trust corporate logo pull up. A man in a rumpled suit got out. Peterson, the regional supervisor. Her email had worked faster than she'd expected. He was inside for less than an hour. When he came out, Marcus was with him, all smiles and confident handshakes. Marcus clapped Peterson on the shoulder, and they both laughed. It was the easy camaraderie of men who saw the world the same way. Ilara's heart sank. Peterson had not come to investigate. He had come to be placated. Marcus had spun some story, charmed his way out of it, and turned the inquiry into a joke. Her anonymous contribution had failed. Worse, it may have backfired. Her fears were confirmed that afternoon. She was in the public library, using a computer to monitor internal corporate communications through a secure portal she had access to as CEO. A new email had just been circulated to the regional management team. It was from Peterson. Subject: Commendation for Marcus Thorne, Northwood Branch. Ilara's blood ran cold as she read it. Following up on a frivolous and anonymous complaint, the email began, "I paid a visit to the Northwood branch today. I found manager Marcus Thorne running a tight and efficient ship. In fact, far from the baseless accusations, I discovered an instance of his exemplary community-minded leadership. He recently worked with a struggling single mother, finding a creative and compassionate out-of-the-box solution to help her avoid foreclosure. This is exactly the kind of proactive, brand-enhancing management we need to encourage. Marcus is a credit to Sterling Trust." He had stolen Maria's story. Somehow, Marcus had learned of the anonymous aid Maria had received, likely through some follow-up call, and had twisted it, claiming it as his own initiative. He had taken Ilara's act of quiet intervention and worn it as a badge of honor. He had not just deflected the accusation, he had used it to elevate himself. He was more cunning and more shameless than she had imagined. Working from the shadows was not enough. He could twist any truth, absorb any good deed into his own narrative of success. She was fighting a ghost who was an expert at propaganda. And now, things were about to get much, much worse. A new email popped into her secure inbox. This one was from the Executive Committee for the Titan merger. Subject: Urgent. Site visit confirmation. As part of their final due diligence, Titan's executive team has requested a surprise spot check of a model branch tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. They want to see our community banking philosophy in action. Based on a glowing recommendation from his regional supervisor, we have selected Marcus Thorne's Northwood branch. Please have him and his team prepared. The future of this merger may well depend on the impression we make. Alara stared at the screen, the words blurring together. It was a perfect storm of her own making. Her anonymous tip had led to a commendation, which had led to this. The very man who embodied everything wrong with the company was about to be presented to their new partners as the shining example of their success. Marcus Thorne was not just going to win. He was going to be celebrated for his corruption. The ticking clock in her head was now a deafening alarm. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. That was it. That was her last stand. The pressure was immense, a physical weight pressing down on her. The merger, her father's company, the jobs of thousands of employees, the ethical compass of her entire organization. It all rested on what would happen in that small bank branch in less than 24 hours. She felt a surge of panic, a desperate urge to call her second-in-command, to pull the plug, to reveal herself right now and bring the corporate hammer down on Marcus. But she knew she could not. If she did that, she would just be another distant CEO firing a manager based on a report. The VPs and the board would see it as an isolated incident. The systemic problem would remain hidden. The culture of fear and prejudice would fester. Chun Wei and the Titan executives would see a company in chaos, its leadership disconnected from its operations. They might even pull out of the deal. No, she had to see this through. She had to play the role she had chosen to the very end. She needed a plan. A way to detonate the truth in the middle of that carefully staged presentation. A way that was so undeniable, it would force everyone to see Marcus for what he truly was. Her gaze fell upon her father's journal. The answer was not in a corporate directive or a hostile takeover. It was in the truth. Her truth. A new level of danger had entered the equation. Marcus, emboldened by his success, was now a bigger threat. He felt untouchable. As she left the library, deep in thought, she decided to walk past the bank one last time. It was late, and the branch was closed. She saw him through the large glass windows. He was inside, talking to his staff, who were busy cleaning and polishing everything in sight. He was not helping. He was directing, pointing, his expression one of utter disdain. He berated a young janitor for leaving a smudge on the glass, his voice a low growl even through the thick window. Then, he looked up and saw her. He saw her standing on the sidewalk, watching. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. For the first time, he seemed to see her not just as a piece of insignificant refuse, but as a potential problem. A loose end. He strode to the door and flung it open, the evening air suddenly sharp with his hostility. You again, he spat. What are you doing? Casing the place. Alara stood her ground. I was just walking by. I told you not to come back here, he snarled, stepping closer. His eyes fell on the journal in her hands. What is that? What are you writing in there? Before she could react, he snatched it from her grasp. Her breath caught in her throat. It felt as if he had stolen a part of her soul. He flipped it open, his lips curling into a sneer as he saw her neat handwriting, her diagrams of customer flow, her notes on his behavior. What is this garbage? Doodles? Are you some kind of crazy person? A secret shopper? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think you're going to get me in trouble? You. He held the journal up as if it were a dirty rag. This is private property, he said, his voice dripping with menace. And you are trespassing. I have a good mind to call the police and have you arrested. Now get out of here. And don't ever let me see your face again. He did not give the journal back. He turned, walked back into the bank, and tossed it contemptuously onto a trash can just inside the door. He gave her one last look of triumph and locked the door. Alara stood frozen on the sidewalk, the violation echoing through her. He had taken her father's journal. He had taken her connection to her past, her guide for the future, and thrown it away like trash. That was his final mistake. He had made this personal. Now, there was no more calculation. There was no more strategy. There was only the cold, hard certainty of a reckoning. Tomorrow, at 10 a.m., she would not just expose a corrupt manager. She would reclaim her father's legacy from the hands of a man who was unworthy to even stand in its shadow. The morning arrived with a cool, steely gray light. Alara did not sleep. She spent the night preparing, not in a boardroom, but in the quiet solitude of her hotel room. She made 2 phone calls, one to her chief of staff, giving a simple, cryptic instruction, the other to Maria Sanchez, the woman Marcus had humiliated. She dressed in the same clothes as the day before. The uniform of the invisible. It was her armor. At 9:45 a.m., she stood across the street, watching the stage being set. The black Mercedes from the day before was there, along with 2 other luxury sedans. The delegation had arrived. Through the polished windows, she could see a group of about 10 people. Marcus was in his element, gliding through the lobby, shaking hands, his face a mask of professional charm. She recognized Mr. Harrison, a senior vice president from Sterling Trust's corporate office, a man she had met only once, briefly, at a company-wide town hall. And she recognized the man at the center of the group, Chun Wei, the CEO of Titan International. He was exactly as his reputation described him, impeccably dressed, with a quiet, observant intensity. His gaze missed nothing. This was the arena. At precisely 10 a.m., Alara crossed the street and walked toward the bank. She pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped inside. The hushed, reverent atmosphere immediately fractured. Every head turned. Marcus was in the middle of a sentence, gesturing toward a series of charts on a large display. And as you can see, our community outreach and client satisfaction metrics are the highest in the region. His voice died in his throat when he saw her. His mask of charm dissolved, replaced by a flash of pure, unadulterated rage. "You," he hissed, his face turning a blotchy red. "I told you. Security. Get her out of here. Now." 2 uniformed security guards, positioned by the door for the event, started to move toward her. "Ma'am, you need to leave," one of them said, his hand reaching for her arm. Alara did not look at him. Her eyes were locked on Marcus. "What seems to be the problem, Marcus?" Mr. Harrison asked, his voice laced with annoyance at the interruption. "Just a disgruntled vagrant, Mr. Harrison," Marcus said, trying to regain his composure. "Caused a disturbance yesterday. I'll have her removed so we can continue." But before the guards could touch her, another voice cut through the tension. It was a calm, authoritative voice from the back of the group. "Miss Vance, is that you?" Every person in the room froze. The name hung in the air, electric and impossible. Mr. Harrison turned, his eyes wide with disbelief. He stared at Alara, at her worn jeans and plain sweatshirt, and then back at the powerful, impeccably dressed woman he knew as the CEO of Vance Holdings. The 2 images refused to reconcile in his mind. I don't understand," Harrison stammered. Alara took a step forward. The security guards hesitated, confused. "It's quite simple, Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice no longer the soft, deferential whisper she had used before. It was clear, resonant, and filled with an authority that commanded attention. "I am here to finish the assessment that Mr. Thorne so rudely interrupted yesterday." Marcus's face had gone from red to a pasty, sickly white. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. "Vance. No, it can't be. This is a trick." Chun Wei, who had been watching the entire exchange with a silent, calculating expression, spoke for the first time. His English was perfect, with a faint, clipped accent. "Perhaps you should let the young woman speak, Mr. Thorne. I am most interested to hear what she has to say." The implicit command in his tone silenced Marcus completely. Alara's gaze swept over the room, meeting the eyes of the stunned executives. "For the past 2 days," she began, "I have been a customer at this branch. I came here to understand the truth of how Sterling Trust interacts with the communities it claims to serve. I wanted to see if the values we preach in our boardrooms are the same values we practice on our floors." She looked directly at Marcus. "They are not." She then recounted everything. Her loan application and his condescending denial. Her observations of his discriminatory treatment of customers. His public humiliation of Maria Sanchez. "Mr. Thorne just told you about his exemplary work with a struggling single mother," Alara continued, her voice ringing with cold fury. "He presented it as his own initiative, a shining example of his compassionate leadership. He lied." She gestured toward the entrance. On cue, the door opened, and Maria Sanchez walked in. She looked nervous but resolute. "This is Maria," Alara said. "Why don't you ask her about the creative solution Mr. Thorne provided?" All eyes turned to Maria. She looked at Marcus, and for the first time, there was no fear in her eyes, only a quiet dignity. "He told me I was irresponsible," Maria said, her voice shaking slightly but clear. "He said my problems were my own fault and that the bank was not a charity. He threw my papers back at me and told me to leave." The only help I received came from an anonymous foundation that called me later that day. I have never spoken to this man before or since that moment he insulted me in front of everyone. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus looked like a trapped animal, his eyes darting around for an escape that did not exist. Lies. She's lying, he sputtered. They're in it together. This is a setup. But Alara was not finished. This was the moment of undeniable proof. She turned to Chinwei. She switched from English to flawless, fluent Mandarin, the language she knew he preferred for sensitive negotiations. Mr. Chun, she said, her tone respectful but firm. I apologize that you had to witness this. My father taught me that a company's character is revealed in its darkest corners. Before we finalize our partnership, I had to be certain of the character of this company. I hope you will agree that Article 7, Clause 4 of our merger agreement, the one concerning absolute ethical compliance at the consumer level, is more important than ever. A flicker of profound surprise and deep respect crossed Chinwei's face. He replied in Mandarin, his voice smooth as silk. Miss Vance, your father was a wise man, and it is clear you are his daughter. Your methods are unorthodox, but your commitment to integrity is precisely why Titan wishes to partner with Vance Holdings. You have my full confidence. The exchange, completely incomprehensible to Marcus and most of the others, was the final, devastating blow. It was a display of knowledge and authority that could not be faked. Marcus Thorne finally broke. The last vestiges of his arrogance crumbled, leaving only a pathetic, whimpering fear. Please, he whispered, looking at Mr. Harrison. It was a mistake. I didn't know. Alara switched back to English, her voice like ice. That is the entire point, Mr. Thorne. You didn't know? You judged a person's worth by their clothes. You decided their value based on their postcode. You assumed weakness and vulnerability were things to be exploited, not protected. Your problem is not that you insulted me. Your problem is that you would have insulted anyone you thought was beneath you. She walked over to the trash can by his desk. She reached inside and pulled out the worn leather journal. She held it up for everyone to see. You called this garbage, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Doodles. This journal was my father's. It contains the founding principles of this company. And in the back, it contains my notes from the last 2 days. A detailed record of every rule you have broken, every person you have demeaned, and every lie you have told. It is now evidence. She walked over to Mr. Harrison and placed the journal in his trembling hands. Mr. Thorne's employment with Sterling Trust and any and all subsidiaries of Vance Holdings is terminated effective immediately, she declared, her voice echoing in the silent bank. Security, please escort this man off the premises. He is to collect his personal belongings and never set foot in one of our buildings again. The 2 guards, who had been standing frozen, now moved with swift purpose. They each took one of Marcus's arms. He did not resist. He was utterly defeated, a hollowed-out shell of the tyrant he had been only minutes before. As they led him away, his gaze met Alara's one last time. It was a look of pure, pathetic disbelief. The look of a man whose entire world had been dismantled before his eyes. As the door closed behind him, a stunned silence remained. Chinwei was the first to break it. He walked over to Alara, a genuine smile on his face. Miss Vance, he said, extending his hand. The merger is confirmed. I have never been more certain of a business deal in my life. Your company is in very, very good hands. Alara shook his hand, a wave of relief washing over her. Thank you, Mr. Chun. We have a lot of work to do, but I promise you, we will build something worthy of both our legacies. Mr. Harrison, still pale, rushed to her side. Miss Vance, I am so sorry. I had no idea. This is a complete failure of my oversight. I will tender my resignation immediately. Alara looked at him, her expression softening slightly. That won't be necessary, Mr. Harrison. You didn't create this problem. You just failed to see it. Now, you're going to help me fix it. She was no longer just the CEO. She was a force of change, ignited by injustice. My first official directive as the head of the new Integration Oversight Committee is this, she announced, her voice resonating with newfound power. We are launching a full, top-to-bottom audit of every single consumer-facing branch. We will review customer service protocols, loan practices, and employee feedback systems. Her eyes found Maria, who was watching with a look of awe. Furthermore, Alara continued, We are establishing a new community first fund. It will be an independent microlending initiative designed to provide emergency assistance and financial literacy support to our most vulnerable customers. Its initial seed money will be the entirety of Mr. Thorne's forfeited annual bonus and stock options. A murmur of approval went through the room. And I want Maria Sanchez to be its first consultant, Alara declared. We need people on our team who understand the problems we're trying to solve because they have lived them. We will offer her a full-time position with a salary and benefits that reflect her value. Maria gasped, her hands flying to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. This time, they were tears of joy. And finally, Alara said, looking at Harrison and retrieving her father's journal from his hands, I want my property back. This will serve as the guiding document for our new path forward. She held the journal tight. It was more than just paper and leather. It was a promise to her father, and a promise to every customer who had ever been made to feel invisible. 6 months later, the view from Alara Vance's office was breathtaking. It encompassed the entire city, a sprawling tapestry of steel and glass that glittered under the afternoon sun. The office itself was a testament to minimalist power, clean lines, modern art, and a large oak desk that was clear of everything except a laptop, a telephone, and a single, well-worn leather journal. Alara, dressed in a sharply tailored navy blue suit, stood at the head of a conference table. She was no longer playing a role. She was inhabiting her own. She was the Chief Integration Officer of the newly formed Vance Titan Financial Group, one of the most powerful positions in global finance. The Vance Initiative is not optional, she said, addressing a group of senior executives, the same men who had once seen her as an anonymous face in a crowd. Every member of the C-suite, myself included, will spend 1 week per year working on the front lines. You will answer phones, you will sit in branch offices, you will pack boxes in our warehouses. You will see the company not from the top down, but from the ground up. There were no objections. The story of her undercover work at the Northwood branch had become a corporate legend, a cautionary tale, and a statement of intent. The culture was changing, slowly but surely. Fear was being replaced with accountability. Her father's journal sat on her desk, a silent observer. It was a constant reminder of her purpose. She had not just fired a corrupt manager. She had begun the long, arduous process of healing a broken system. The Community First Fund was a resounding success. In just a few months, it had helped over 200 families avoid foreclosure, funded dozens of small community projects, and provided financial literacy workshops to thousands. Its head of community outreach was Maria Sanchez. Maria now had her own office, not as grand as Alara's, but bright and welcoming. She had proven to be a natural leader, her empathy and first-hand experience making her incredibly effective. She was not just an employee, she was a partner in Alara's vision for a more humane bank. She had rehired the teller who had shown her kindness that day, promoting her to assistant manager of the newly reformed Northwood branch. The system was being rebuilt, piece by piece, by the very people it had once been designed to crush. One afternoon, an inter-office memo landed on Alara's desk. It was from the Human Resources Department, a standard update on former employees. Her eyes scanned the list until she found the name she was looking for. Thorne Marcus. The update was brief but deeply satisfying. After his public disgrace, Marcus Thorne had been permanently blacklisted by the financial industry. The story had spread, and no reputable firm would touch him. His assets had been frozen pending an investigation into his fraudulent performance reports, and he had been forced to sell his luxury car and oversized house. The memo included his current listed employment. He was working for a call center, selling dubious extended car warranties. A petty tyrant had become a disembodied voice on the phone, reading from a script, his power reduced to the potential of annoying someone during dinner. He was a cautionary tale, a ghost haunting the halls of corporate greed, a reminder that true power is not about the title on your door, but the character in your heart. Alara closed the file. She felt no pity, only a quiet sense of justice. She had not set out to destroy one man, but to build a better world. His downfall was merely a byproduct of that construction. She picked up her father's journal, its familiar weight of comfort in her hand. She flipped to a clean page in the back and uncapped her pen. The work is not done, she wrote. It is never done, but it had begun. And for the first time in a long time, Looking out over the vast city below, she felt a profound sense of hope. The future was not something to be inherited, but something to be built, one honorable decision at a time.